Hopefully this works. Oh, what? Hang on.
It says we're in.
I'm going to give new links. What's up, everybody? Just trying to get people in here. Boom. All right, Dex is here. Here's Dex, and there's Lauren.
Bad boy.
Everybody's here. What's
Join
up?
button.
What was that?
I had to hit the join button, apparently.
Yeah, imagine that's crazy, huh?
Buttons.
Yeah.
I see these cool shirts. This broke my heart. My man put out so much 10-year gear. Noah shirts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Getting set up. Guys ready to rock?
Hell yeah, brother.
Yeah.
How many dry scoops of that pre-workout did you take, Tommy?
Depends. Mouth or nose?
One, two nostrils and two to the mouth.
Oh, man. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. Sean Woodland, Tommy Marquez, Lauren Kalil, and Dex Hopkins joining us. How you doing, Dex? Thanks for doing this, man.
What's up, man? I appreciate it, brother. Any chance to hop on and chop it up with the boys and the queen, I'll get down with.
Awesome. Well, we got a busy show today. We're going to talk about something we've wanted to talk about for a little while here, and that is, and we got a lot of questions about this at the games, like what happened to the adaptive and the age group coverage, and we wanted to dedicate a whole episode to that because it wasn't something that you could just spend 5 minutes talking about.
Be right back.
All right, Tommy's going to be right back. While Tommy does that, we want to thank our sponsor for today. I'll do that, and that is Airwave, the performance mouthpiece that is scientifically proven through peer-reviewed, published research to increase endurance and airflow, increase strength and muscular endurance, and improved faster recovery times. So what the Airwave mouthpiece does, that sets it apart. It's a patented bottom fit design mouthpiece, meaning you mold it to your bottom teeth. It helps direct your tongue down and forward, and when you gently bite down on it, it creates an optimal airway opening. And if you're like me, I know I am, you need some scientific data here, all right? Well, use of the mouthpiece in test subjects found an 8% increase in the diameter of the throat, a 9% increase in the width, and there was also a 51% reduction in cortisol 1 hour after high-intensity exercise, which helps with recovery.
It also helps with getting more pre-workout in faster.
I didn't know that.
I like
Now
that.
we're talking.
There you go. And when used during a steady state run, the Airwave mouthpiece resulted in a 28.5% reduction in respiratory rate compared to before the mouthpiece was put in. I've been using this thing for like a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Love it. Use it all the time. It's fantastic. You guys should check it out. You can go to airwave.com. That's AIRWAAV.com and use our code TEF15. That's airwave.com. Use our code TEF15 and you will thank us because that thing is it's a little godsend. I go nowhere without that. Any physical activity, hockey, working out, that thing's going in because it's
become a mainstay at the games. Too.
I have the lungs of a
Yeah, it does.
I have the lungs of a 12-year-old girl, so I need to.
I feel like
increase my
good lungs.
capacity.
I feel like
probably. Well, then like a 5. Then my son. All right, my son's
yeah.
lungs. Okay.
Points to him.
Exactly. He's right over there. It's bring your kid to work day today.
Hold on, time out. You said in hockey, this thing's taking the place of the old Happy Gilmore mouthpiece?
Yeah, I don't wear the mouthpiece. I just don't because I can't
What
breathe
a
through that
monster.
thing. This I can breathe through. So, I still got all the
Winning.
checklists.
Good
There
Lord.
you go.
Full send.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into this. So the main thing we wanted to talk about today is what happened with the age group and adaptive coverage. And you and I were talking about this, and this is one of those discussions where you got to hold opposing thoughts in your head at the same time because two opposing things can be true at once.
Yes.
So you want to expand on that? What you were talking about?
What about the age group?
Yeah, it's like because everyone was like they deserve this, and they
Yes.
do. Age group and adaptive athletes absolutely 100% deserve the attention, deserve the coverage.
Well, so two things can be true, and this is kind of, I guess, what you were kind of setting me up for. The age group and adaptive athletes have put in a tremendous amount of work, have built themselves an amazing amount of fitness, and at the highest level, that effort and that training is deserving of coverage that matches that effort and intensity and the amazing things that they do. At the same time, you can also understand that if you're going to look at this from a big picture standpoint. There's a business element of this too. And it's something that I've been saying for a long time, that in some ways, the Masters community, or the people that are lobbying for more Masters coverage, just aren't in touch with the reality of how many people are showing up on live streams, coverage, digesting media, doing all of that stuff that helps pay the bill for it. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Because, you know, you post a video with Masters athletes, it gets a fraction of the views. The participation from the Masters contingent and the people lobbying for it isn't at a level where it can sustain high level coverage for a long time, unless it wants to try and stand on its own, if that makes sense.
Agreed. And I think, like, so there's two things to consider. Is like, it's the business decision.
Yeah.
And then there's the way that it was executed.
For sure.
And there's like the emotional impact of that.
Yeah.
So you got to go back a while to figure out how we got here. Right. So if you got to go back to like the 2012, 2013 and look at the way that CrossFit used to spend money around the games.
Yeah.
There was a blank check. And my favorite story is like in 2013, and we've had Mike Roth, our TV director, on telling this before on our show, is Mike Roth, our director, was going over things with Tony Budding about the aerial coverage that we would have at the games. I believe it was 2013.
Oh, this is a great story.
Yeah, because they had a helicopter that was going to cover the StubHub Center, right? And they were going. Rothy was explaining the coverage windows to Tony about how, you know, we'll have it here, and then we'll have a couple hours where we won't, and then we'll have it here. And it's like, well, why won't we have it? Well, it's got to refuel. And Tony was like, well, that's unacceptable. So long story short, they got their production guy on the phone, a guy by the name of Eric Thomas. We called him ET. He's like, you got to find another helicopter because we have to have aerial coverage the entire time. They just wrote the check. Exactly. They just wrote the check. And then it was like
money.
And then it's like, we have to cover Masters. Like, that was a big thing with us when we would do the update show. It was like, when I first started, it's like, Tony was, Masters are half our audience. We have to cover the Masters. And then that led to, all right, we have to cover them at the games too.
Well, that was a change too, because in 2012, my job at the games was helping with the Masters production, which was in a parking lot. Mm-hmm. And it was with a handful of like cameras running around. It was very like loose and informal, and so much so that they forgot to book a play-by-play color person. So at some points I was like helping out, shooting stuff, then coming back and like just talking about what I saw on the live stream. And then someone, who was it? I can't remember. Someone like, what's this cord go to? And pulled the live stream plug for it. And it was just, it was all over the place. And at some point they decided to bring them, you know, into the soccer stadium more, where they did that for a couple of years. And then the coverage started to slowly expand. The other way that some of those Masters numbers have been artificially bumped up too is the creation of new Masters categories. So when you talk about half your audience, the Masters categories of 35 to 39 occupies a gross majority of the Masters.
But this was even before that.
Sure.
That was the argument.
Yeah.
And I remember one of them, like I guess the biggest like the most hot water I got in like early on was when like we did an update show and we didn't cover the Masters. And it was like,
Sean's taking the heat for all this. That's the lesson to be learned.
Right. Everybody acts like Sean is the one who decides who gets coverage and who doesn't.
It's all my call. But
I don't.
Go ahead, Lauren.
No. I don't know if we want to get into this yet, but at some point I do want to get back to Brandon's comment in the chat part, asking what our thoughts are on the Dave Castro saying that content creators had access if they wanted to for age groups.
Yeah.
And adaptives.
And case in point, right? Like the Buttery Bros do great work, but they know what's going to get them views. And going out and spending a bunch of time on Masters and adaptive athletes, while they might get some some cool moments, that is not what is going to move the needle. And
right, but I
know
also
that.
think that like if Dave is making a comment like that, it's kind of just punting it to us and saying, well, the content creators in the space can go do it instead of, well, I don't know. I have so many thoughts on this. And
all right, we'll go
Well, you
ahead. What
guys,
are they?
well, you
Go ahead,
guys are
Dex.
like victim. Yeah, well, you guys are victims of the numbers. You have to do stuff that gets the numbers, right? Like, and that's it. And so in my thinking, because the 35, 39, obviously I'm excited. It's the first year I get to do it. And then what's the first year we had? That was it 2018, 19, Sean?
For 35, 39?
Yeah. It's new.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's relatively new. I think it's 2018.
Yeah. 18, got to be, I think. Last year regionals. And so I was excited about that because, by God, from team to individual, I've been selling out for Masters my whole life. But the cool part of that to me is you get to see, and we're seeing this with like the Dallin Peppers, the Emma Careys, the Emma Lawsons, the young guard coming into the elite category. I think there's value, especially for the things like you think about in 2018 when they cut regionals, they did all these cuts. Greg wanted to get back to what the methodology was, and it's not sport and this. I think the more direct line to the community, and this may be something they could dive in on and kind of, sit on that grenade and see if it blows up for them. Those people that come out of elite, I mean, like Sam this year, awesome to come back and see. Scott Panchake was out there. Rich is never going to do it. Like, I understand that, but it's cool to watch that lead up. Mayhem's media team knows that. They cover it all the way through, right? You see Easy go do it with them, a few other people that kind of hop on that train. But seeing people move through every category, I think, is a real missed topic for, the health of the sport. And then more so, like, outside of the sport, how the methodology can carry you through to those years, like the Hippenspiels and the older people because I mean, that dude 65 plus is insane to see those people do, the degree and like the needs are the same, just the degree is different. It's insane to see them do very close workouts to what the elite people are doing. The load's different, maybe the volume's a little different, but they are essentially doing the movements. And so, I mean, it's weird too. It breaks my heart to not see those people covered. And they do punt it to you guys, but you got to go, like you talk about Marston and Hebert, like, and people like that. Like, you got to do what does numbers because that's the business of you guys. So it's a difficult situation for everybody.
Well, I don't think punting to content creators is fair because one, someone asked like, hey, why didn't they have the content creators cover that? And Dave's response was like, they had every freedom to, but it comes down to right now, CrossFit doesn't want to pay for it. Yeah, and because they're not getting the return on it.
And the way that the Buttery Bros get partnerships, sponsorships, and they can finance themselves to cover the CrossFit Games is covering the elite because that's what gets the views. So again, punting it to content creators. Okay, when your views get an eighth of what they will for elite individuals, how can anybody expect content creators to make a living off of this? And it's just, I understand it's a business, and it does break my heart that there wasn't, I mean, no way to sugarcoat it. There wasn't great coverage of the Masters and adaptives.
Oh, for sure.
I think we can all agree on that. My biggest issue, though, was the way that it was communicated.
Because
I have friends that, right, and I have friends that are coaches of Masters athletes, go to affiliates with Masters athletes, do nutrition for Masters athletes, and they were like, if we would have known this ahead of time, we would have booked a flight and we would have gone to support them in person. But there was no opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
I think from a business standpoint, I think this is the right decision, and I personally think it should have been made a long time ago. And it goes back to just spending money and having to cover everybody. Like, no one stood up and said, hey guys, look at the money we're spending and look at the return we're getting on that. For years, no one said that. And it costs several $100,000 just to put on, like Masters coverage. Then you add adaptive, and you add multiple heats, you add multiple venues. Like, that price tag goes up. It is a hefty price tag. And when you looked at the concurrent views and where people were going, the money it didn't make sense to make that investment. And like I said, I just think no one stood up and said anything for a long enough time. And then it was just expected that this was going to happen year after year after year after year. And this year they finally said, we just can't do this anymore. The problem was, like, to your point, Lauren, they didn't communicate that. The second you make that decision, you send Dave Castro, whoever is your person out there, and you say, here's what's going on. This is why we had to make the decision. This is what we're going to try to provide. And we're sorry, but this is the way it is moving forward.
Yeah.
And maybe not even apologize. Just say, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right. They at the end of the day, they don't need to apologize. They are a business, and it is a business decision. And from a business element, I understand that if the views aren't happening, I'm not kidding. I went to North Park to watch one of my friends compete in the 60 to 65 division. And I mean, there was nobody even in the stands.
Lunchtime.
So it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it's hard to say, yes, they are. I don't want to say deserving because that's the wrong word, but it's hard to say that it's
That's
to give
worth the
them the
money.
same
Yeah.
coverage, right, as the elites when it comes to a financial decision. So it's.
Yeah.
But what's crazy though is on the back end, there's those very inspirational clips that we have of adaptive athletes and masters athletes and all that. Yeah. You know, and it's.
Yeah.
And they don't, I've been told they don't like those communities don't like the word inspirational.
No, they don't.
I know the adaptive division, they don't. Yeah. They call it the I word.
Mm-hmm.
But
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's, I think they prefer motivated.
Sure.
The word. Either way, but those highlights are great and those stories are great. But I think maybe we need to reframe how we look at what coverage is going to be in this new era where CrossFit is much more aware of how they're operating on a business level because one, I agree with everything about the communication. Like they should have communicated that earlier, and that was a huge misstep. But I want to touch on one thing that Julie Jones says about if the data that we're looking at the past couple of years for viewership, is it data that's overlapping with individuals? And the short answer on that is no. It's years of data that involve seeing how people respond to pieces of content that are solely focused on masters. How when the masters did have their own days leading into what did that coverage look like? What was attendance looking like? What was activation from sponsors looking like? And it just consistently underperformed. And it's not to say that those athletes aren't amazing. They don't deserve to be highlighted in some fashion, and that what they're doing doesn't have value to the community in ways that Dex touched on, which I think was very important too. But it's almost like you become used to a certain type of coverage, and then it's very difficult to take stuff away.
Yeah, and like I said, probably should have been done a while ago because it is a significant cost, and if they are looking to put the sport and the season on sound financial ground, that's probably the first place you got to look. It's like, is this investment worth the return?
Well, it sucks to have that on the trim and the fat block, like as far as the brutal financial stuff of it. And after the kind of exodus for Greg stuff, like that's who's coming in. It's been a string of business people, right? Like, I mean, Rosa, business person. This guy seems very business minded, especially when there's a microphone in front of his face. And so, I don't. It definitely is brutal for them to get cut. And like, look how they've even formatted it now. Like, it butts up to the start of the games. Like, their award ceremony is right before the opening ceremony of the elite group. And
that scheduling did allow them to have their final heats and championship, like their final event covered, the way that they wanted to. So that there is part of that. But and Dex, you bring up a good point about the business thing. It's like I think everybody needs to understand that, as it probably should be, money is going to be a gigantic determining factor in what happens from here on out, what gets covered, what gets organized. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Go ahead, Dex.
I mean, not if we're wanting to go pro, man, and we're wanting to treat this thing at the sport level, have these people feel like professional athletes and not like, this one time a year, hopefully the stuff I'm good at pops up and I have a well-rounded enough fitness to go and make a little money and not rely on like my t-shirt and my shoe money. Right. And that's just the hard reality of it right now. And so I don't hate treating it like a business. I think there's a way to make everyone happy in that sense and make it make sense, I guess. And I don't know what that looks like as far as like maybe separate events, separate venues, separate time of year. Cause I mean, right now, dude, I remember a time when there was so many events throughout the year that CrossFit and Rogue would weave in throughout the year. I mean, team series, stuff like that just got everybody involved in a lot of stuff. And it wasn't games level, but you saw games athletes participate alongside people in the affiliate. I used to form our affiliate calendar, like event calendar around those things, liftoff, team series, stuff like that was a huge deal. And it kept the fire burning all year. And when you put the focus on, and not to say we can't go back to that or those things won't come with new leadership and all that, but those things aren't it now. So all the pressure is here. And like Sean said, when the expectation is this coverage, because this is what I get to see when it's Matt, Tia, Justin, whoever, like you expect that for everybody, and it's not the same. But that's exactly what Sean's right. Like, you put it under a microscope when this is the only show throughout the entire calendar.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was to say Julie had a very important comment. I think it's that top one, because I think these are the considerations that aren't about taking off work. Like people taking off work to watch the age group specifically, but that stuff isn't communicated to them.
Wow.
That's if we want to make the games this event, right? Like this must-see TV, this appointment television, which is very difficult, which doesn't happen nowadays outside of live sports. People are going to make, adjustments. I don't know if it's sacrifices, but if you're taking that time off work, that's a big deal, and they deserve to know. So that's where I completely understand the issues on the communication side, but I don't know. All week long, I heard people talking about how masters should be their own thing. They should separate them. And it's like, okay, you want to stand on your own? I
don't think the actual masters athletes want that.
They don't.
And again, yeah, not that I've spoken to the majority of them, because there's a lot of them, but every time I ask that question to a masters athlete, they say that they want to be part of the big show.
Yeah.
Be right back.
Well, there are opportunities throughout the year. Wadapalooza has age groups. There's a few events.
Legends.
There's a Legends, Masters Fitness Collective. There's a few opportunities. I think Masters Fitness Collective, like last year, I was supposed to go do it and ended up not. But the coverage and stuff went really well. I'm going to go do it this year. But there are opportunities to do that. I'm not sure that the result, people like you said, you ask them and they say no. It's because they know the result will not be what you want. It sounds cool, but you would much rather have limited coverage. And there's a solution, I'm sure. It would not be the zip wire camera covering people running down the field and the flyovers and people running down with close-up cameras, but it would be coverage. And so I don't know what the happy medium is, but I definitely don't think it's a standalone event to where that's their show, and it would not be what they wanted.
I think in some ways it's going to maybe require more manpower and effort than maybe CrossFit has to spend at this point. At least in the near term, because there may be creative solutions, but I think someone even suggested, Diane mentioned volunteers placed throughout the venue to follow athletes, but I can tell you right now that's not going to be a good product unless you're getting professional cameramen who are willing to work for free. It's gonna and then you still have to bring those cameras in somewhere. Like that process, like the podcast coverage that ultimately came out during semifinals, that was bootstrapped together. One was made possible by the efforts of some really dedicated people that in a realistic fashion should have been paid for it. Two, that whole problem came from CrossFit not wanting to pay for it in the first place, which it's obviously, again, business decisions. Covering 2 floors is expensive. Want to protect protect where you can. And so it's like we're back at the same point. Like there's almost like a non-starter that like if it's not going to fit the budget, then it's not going to happen. We can come up with creative solutions, but there's getting people to work for free at certain levels when you're paying professionals in other areas is a really difficult ask.
Well, because you could absolutely have people with iPhones shooting close-up shots, doing quick athlete interviews. And like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if CrossFit gave them like free festival and Coliseum passes for the week and they are a volunteer to help shoot like the masters and age group, I think that it could potentially work. But again, the quality is not going to be anywhere near what you get for the elites and the teams. And I just worry that, yes, if we provide that or somebody provides that, it's going to be the same conversation of, wow, the coverage is such shit. It looks so bad. And just the same people. And I don't want to say that people are just complaining about this, because I do 100% agree that the communication to this was terrible and almost non-existent. And I'm frustrated too, but it makes me worry that at the end of the day, sometimes like any coverage that you give people, it's just not going to be enough unless it is perfect.
Sure.
Well, we were actually, it's funny. We were talking about that exact thing on site when everyone realized, okay, this is what it is. If you had done nothing, people would have said, well, why can't you just put a wide camera up and just lock it off so we can see it? Okay, well, that's what they did. All right, well, why can't you then do multiple cameras so I can get closer, I can see? Okay, then if you do that, then to your point, Lauren, well, why does this look so terrible? You know,
why is the internet breaking in and out? It's grainy.
Yeah. It's always going to be something. It's always going to be something for sure.
If we're talking about like what we can do to solve this, which I'm guessing we are, like what's an alternative would be. I think there's a couple things CrossFit could do. So if you're going to choose to continue to have the masters and adaptive divisions be part of whatever the games are going to be, so it's all in one locale, it's all its own event. One thing you could do is you could say, all right, and I'll use Flow Sports as an example. Yeah, you could say, okay, Flow, you pay us X. Okay, you buy the rights to this broadcast. You can come in and do it. All right, they can put it behind a paywall, and they can try to make money off it.
And people are going to complain about the paywall.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Or you can do.
But they would pay it.
Or if you want to watch,
I think
and you want to get
be a paywall.
Or I mean, that's a whole other conversation. Or you say, okay, production company, Prestige Worldwide, you can come in, you buy the rights off us. You own this broadcast. You can sell all the ads. You can sell like any money you can make off this is all yours, but you pay us the licensing fee. And that way you could get a pretty decent broadcast of those events and those divisions.
The question is, will there be people that are willing to pay for it when they see what the numbers are typically for Masters coverage?
That's the thing.
But here's what's crazy to me
circle,
is like,
right?
well, you bring up Flow. Like Flow used to cover Waterpalooza. I mean, when Armin used to work for Flow, I mean, it was elaborate, and they had a whole setup. And like, I think at any point we got an Etch-a-Sketch, an iPhone, a professional camera, flyover, whatever. Somebody's going to bitch about it. I don't think everybody's always going to be 100% happy, but I think like, trying to cover those people and like Julie's talking about taking off work for that, man, when it's like near and dear to your heart, where you have somebody close to you watching, like it's a huge deal to you, right? Like that's the 0.001% of people that get to go do this thing. And if they're in your gym, especially, you're losing your mind. So if you couldn't make the trip, you're taking off work. So you can do the popcorn, watch it at the gym thing with a big group of people, hopefully. And like having an option is better than having no option, even with people bitching about it. And like, I didn't even know Flow was still a thing, Tommy. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. So
they do a lot of and their business models, like they can do collegiate wrestling. Well, what do you need for collegiate wrestling? One camera.
Yeah, one camera.
They're
They
the
do
Ocho.
other sports,
They're the Ocho. They do pickleball.
Yeah.
But there's a comment. Maggie made a comment like, if there is a paywall, then I would expect a pretty good broadcast. Yes, and that's the thing. It's like if you're going to pay for it, there is an expectation.
Well, that's what did Flow in, right? And people were paying for these at the time. I think they had maybe ECC, they had Waterpalooza, and they had a couple other events. But then you got beyond it, and you're like, well, this isn't the caliber of broadcast that I'm expecting. Our former coworker left and ended up at Flow, Glancy. Yeah, and he was just like, well, we're bootstrapped. We're going to ask you to pay for this, but they cover track, they cover wrestling, they cover jiu-jitsu. That's locked off, so you can't cover CrossFit like that.
No,
it's just not possible. The dynamic element of every test and how it changes every year means you have a different floor plan and a different camera layout and a different flow of cameras for every single test, and no other sport on the planet does that. And it makes it very difficult.
If nobody's going to deal with the unknown, unknowable, it's going to be us, the cameramen, the athletes, everybody. We're keeping it to the methodology, baby. Nobody knows what's going on.
And then there's some people have suggested there's the volunteer option. Well, why can't they have some volunteers with iPhones? And you look at what Wex and Chase and Brian and that whole crew did at semifinals and putting on coverage of the tests that weren't broadcast. There's that option, but are those people going to do that for free for 3 days?
Is that
not those people?
No, and is that
they were getting torn apart for it in the comment stuff.
Yeah, and is that a step towards professionalizing the sport?
No, but again, we're talking about like what's the best way to get the coverage that people want, so they can watch this live and it can be somewhat decent.
It seems to me that like they're doing a couple steps back to try and take some steps forward, right? Trying to pare down what the coverage and what our spend is to focus on, what could ultimately bring in the big dollars. Because like, if you focus all your efforts on making a really good individual and maybe even teams to some extent, and that catches more fire, then maybe eventually that you'll build it back up enough to trickle down and subsidize the masters and adaptives in a way that they did in the past, because that's what it was in the past.
100%. Yeah,
I like Maggie's suggestion here. They could have done something like a radio broadcast with someone making the calls and keeping people up to date. I think that might be the easiest solution. You eliminate all of the cameras and you have one person on a microphone and the CrossFit podcast.
CrossFit Harry Carey, baby. The play-by-play.
Hi.
Hey, it's the muscle ups.
I think, that the other option is like, I think Lauren, you brought it up, is that people saying that, the masters should just be their own thing. So the other option is to say, okay, we will let someone run the Masters Championship. And I use Bob Jennings as an example, puts on the Legends Championship, fantastic Masters event. I've been able to go to it. The athletes and the fans are so thankful to have you there. Like everyone's so happy to see you and get that level of coverage. But again, you got to pay for it. So you would allow someone an outside organizer to say, okay, you're going to hold this championship. You have to pay for the broadcast, but you own all of the ad revenue, all the sponsorship revenue, all the stuff's on site. That's all yours. Now that might be an intriguing business opportunity for someone to do.
Yep.
But again, to your point, what are the numbers? How much do I have to pay to get that done? And that could be somewhat prohibitive.
Well, so like in this case, do you think like the transparency of like, hey guys, here's how much it costs to put this shit on. Here's how much we make. Nothing. And then, so like this does not fit. Do you think the transparency on the front end cushions the blow and it's less of a conversation if you're like, you know what, that makes sense. You got me there.
Ask yourself this question, Dex, and I think the community can ask themselves this question too. If Dave Castro had come out and answered those questions and made that statement, do you think people would have laid off a little bit?
I think if they bringing Dave back in to be Dave that does open announcements in a suit to be the villain, absolutely. I mean, it would be way less. Yeah. I mean, if I know the punch is coming and I can brace, I'm a lot, okay. But just like you said, the no communication, the nothing up front, just kind of dropping the bomb and walking away is kind of, in bad taste for any situation.
Agreed. But if you do that, so if you do it like, and you have, let's say you have like an adaptive championship, a Masters Championship, and a teen championship, 3 separate events that happen before the CrossFit Games. You could have like championship month, right? And then you get to the games. And then I think the most ideal way to cover the age groups then is that you incorporate some of the cool stories from those championships into your ESPN coverage to tell those stories and let people know who are watching the main show that there are these other great divisions out there, that if you're someone who's in his 40s or in his 50s, there's still an avenue for you to not only get fit, but if you really want to compete, if you're an adaptive athlete, there's an avenue for you to compete, and put those messages on the biggest thing that people are watching, and that is the individual competition. They did that a little bit. I think you guys did a little bit, because it was like a last minute hard left into something that you hadn't planned on doing. But if you know those events are happening leading into the games, you can tell stories in your ESPN coverage when you're crowning the fittest man and woman on earth.
Most other sports that have successful, quote unquote, age group masters divisions, one being jiu-jitsu, they hold it on a separate event. They hold a separate weekend. Masters Worlds is on a different, usually the same venue, but I don't think you'd be able to do that. But they've essentially separated it in a way that gives it a little bit more clearance to see how it operates on itself. But also it allows certain athletes to compete in both. If you do have an athlete that could maybe bridge the gap. But also I think what's great for what Sean does, if you hold it beforehand, there's storytelling opportunities that come out of that, knowing what the result is that you can then put into stuff like the ESPN show, which is where the juice really is.
That's
100%.
almost
Yeah, and pull some of those highlights and those big moments that you could put in the ESPN show and the
Yeah.
coverage. And that's where some of these people at home could really relate if it is somebody in their or within their age bracket.
Well, that enriches the entire coverage too for you guys, right? Like on a 40-minute bike where you gotta have some things. And I mean, it's the lead up to the Super Bowl where there's that big gap. We have all these storylines from the playoffs, right? And then stuff coming up. And they lead that into draft and all this stuff. Like you see it in every other sport. It's difficult to do. And like I follow like the IBJJF stuff, like Tommy's talking about. He's exactly right, because there are people that do both, and it kind of looks like coverage wise, because I've watched a few of them. Like that's like their practice run too, right? Because I mean it's, but they're again, theirs is one event like we talked about. It's not completely different off the wall. Well, on this one we're running through downtown. On this one we're going to be in the lake. Like it's much different. But the framework is out there to kind of make it your own and try to figure it out. And I think that's like the thing is like, the fact that there was no effort, no communication, I think that's the bigger issue than the actual like poor execution.
Yeah, I think once that decision was made, that should have been communicated very clearly. And look, take the bullets. You made this decision, stand up there and defend it. Just say, here's why, here's what we're doing, here's what we're hoping to accomplish by getting some of this on our ESPN coverage. That gives the ESPN crew plenty of time to get prepared for that, as opposed to like a day before when most of those decisions have already been made, and now you got to adjust content and timing and all that stuff and get things edited. But yeah, just get up there and explain why you made the decision.
Yeah, I think Dave will be good for that though.
Agreed.
Like long term,
because let's say you made if that had happened in July, and he had come out and said, "This is what we're doing," taking the questions, even if he just does it on his own YouTube channel. Whatever, at least that's out there. At least someone is out there taking accountability. And it was not fair to people. Like I was waiting. I'm like, when are they going to announce it? Like this is going to happen. And they just
do you remember when you sent this? You sent the screenshots of like the little thumbnails saying that they were going to be broadcasted live.
Yeah, I was like,
so who's calling this?
Right. That was like people would see that on YouTube. Okay, Masters coverage live, and then it's just a locked off camera. It's like,
yeah, I was like, is Chase there yet? Are you guys there yet?
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
So I don't know. But I think that if they were to find a way to, if they keep it in wherever the games are going to be, if they keep it all one thing, let someone come in and do it. Have them pay you a fee, and they can come in and broadcast it. And they can have they can sell all the ads. They can sell all the sponsorship. It can be their little business opportunity. And if you do it with as in a separate event, like now that becomes the sanction model, but with some teeth behind it. Because I think what the problem with the sanction model is that you had so many events that didn't have like big name athletes or the draw. Now you're offering someone a championship event. You might be able to do something cool behind that.
And you look, that's what the Legends and the Masters Collective is. Like it's people trying to make. And I mean, you see like the success like Guido's had building Waterpalooza and what it is. And again, that's not the championship. Waterpalooza is like fitness party festival, but it's doable for sure. And if you want to do it in the context of sport and having these different championships for different divisions, like that's an awesome business opportunity for somebody that has the resources for that stuff. The funniest comment I've seen the whole time is, do you guys think the coverage would be better if Rich was competing in the Masters? Absolutely. Are you crazy?
Yes, 100%. And the coverage would be better for teams if Rich was competing in the teams. Like, I was a little shocked at how empty sometimes some of the team tests were. Inside the Coliseum, like there was, what was it, Friday night where the teams closed out competition because we had Helena, because that was in the ESPN window, and then teams closed out. That place emptied out.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised by that.
It's so my first year was 2015, Rich's first year, 6-person team. They had somebody, they couldn't find a third girl. Remember they had I called her Mother Mayhem. I cannot remember her name to save my life. But they still, dude, tennis stadium, soccer stadium, packed when Rich was out there.
Lauren, the Masters athlete?
Yes, love Lauren. Did great. I remember him shoving her over the hill, him and Matt pushing her over the hill on the run. But like every year we got to go back 2017, it was packed. If you were in Rich's heat, packed Coliseum, packed tennis stadium, wherever you were. So yeah, it's infinitely different no matter what division he's in. And I thought for sure with Sam being Sam and kind of the eyes that come with Sam, and that's an eclectic group of people. And I love Sammy, but it just is. And like Scott Panchek was in there, and like I have a few like personal friends, but I feel like like I said way earlier, I feel like the more trickle over into that, hopefully like the numbers go up and it's more feasible. But it's not going to be Rich numbers, dude. Like
no.
The tough part is, and I think this is where Rich helped his own cause, is Mayhem has their own media team behind them pushing that stuff. So you have these touch points throughout the year.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I love Sam Dancer to death. He's one of the most unique individuals I've ever met. Love him and Jen.
Yeah.
I mean, you may get the people showing up in the stands looking like they're going to Burning Man, but you know, it's the media machine behind Sam Dancer isn't as big, and so you have like I think a lot of people were like, oh yeah, Scott Panchik is in this division this year, and it's like
nice guy.
That should be someone that should draw some people in. Maybe not to the extent that Rich or any of the other games champions would, but if we don't have the touch points throughout the year to kind of keep you invested, then it's going to be really difficult to try and rally that at the last moment.
We'll go back to 2015, and we'd been doing post shows, so post production shows for ESPN. Hang on, but since 2011, the first time they ever cared about come here, dude, come right here. The only time they ever cared about teams was 2015 when Rich, Jason, and Tommy Hackenberg showed up.
Yep, Tommy. Yep. I remember sneaking into that final and getting my ass kicked by Tommy and Rich on either side of me. And seeing like Jason, they weren't throwing a fit, but they were pissed that they wouldn't let him continue because it was like him, Pat Barber, Miranda. I mean, they had a squad that year. Like they were destroying everyone. And so, you know, dude, there was a lot of like story. And even like 2017, I think my last year actually going when they beat Rich and them, like the Stop the Mayhem year when the Brew team took like
2017.
17, yeah, so many storylines, but they all also trickle off like Rich, Adrian, and them super capitalized off that, and then ended up like following through and was cool. But you don't have that, and I love it, dude. There's still a lot of my really good friends, like Chandler's wife was on the Invictus team. Josh Onsham was my dude. They did awesome. The Oslo team, like a lot of those people I know personally, and there are cool stories if you know them personally, but you can't know them personally if those storylines aren't out, and it's not, you know, to someone worth the covers to build up. And so, like, I don't think those things will trickle up without Rich in any division. And I know that he doesn't give a shit to do, you know, and that's the youngest age group, right? Like 35 to 39 is like a step out of, if you're, you know, you can't do elite, you have to go do masters, or it's like you're set on it. That's the youngest group. So it doesn't get more exciting as you go to, you know, 40 to 45. And, you know, so.
Hey, want to know a great way to learn about the athletes?
What?
Bring back Miles to Madison.
Oh yeah.
That's another expenditure on their part.
To me though, that looks like an investment that will pay dividends over and over because it gets people more hyped for the CrossFit Games season and the actual games, because you see the journey that these athletes go through and you get that behind the scenes. Yes, the behind the scenes is great at the games, but it is even more interesting when you feel like you already know these athletes before they get to the games.
That's hard knocks. That's the hard knocks of CrossFit.
Yes. Well, and this is what I think is kind of cool is that, so there's a documentary that's going to be made on the games, and it's being done by an outside production company. You sat for interviews with them. I sat for interviews with them. They've done Real Sports. They've done 30 for 30. They've done like legit stuff. And what's cool about it is they are bringing a perspective that is from outside the CrossFit world. I think when someone from inside the CrossFit space does it, and I'm not like, everything that's been done documentary wise has been great. People enjoy it, but it is certainly talking to an audience that's more or less already been indoctrinated and understands all this stuff. Yeah. I think what's being done with this documentary has a chance to be distributed in areas that will reach people outside the bubble and might get some people, if they have a chance to see it, into it. I still think the best way to do that, though, to your point, Lauren, is an episodic series where you can really get some characters and follow them throughout the season.
Yeah,
or you can look forward to it. You can look forward to it also, right? Like,
yeah. So. I mean, it's funny because you mentioned Miles to Madison, Lauren, because they did that, and Miles to Madison more than paid for itself, along with all the studio coverage that used to be done, but it was never promoted. Like CrossFit didn't promote Miles to Madison on its own channel.
They did some.
It was very minimal. Like,
I remember it being on the back end.
Yeah. It was
like when I think of all of the content creators in the space, and you think about like geographically where people live, it would be so easy to leverage people in the space, like somebody who lives in Iceland, somebody who lives in the UAE, somebody who lives on the East Coast, West Coast. So, like, it doesn't need, in my mind, financially, there are ways that it could work and it could really help drive the storytelling throughout the whole
Sure.
year.
Yeah, absolutely.
The key is though, you have to get that outside of your YouTube channel. You got to get it on like a
for sure.
Netflix or an Amazon
Distribution
Prime
is
or
huge.
wherever.
Hulu, something.
Like that's the way you break through.
Yeah.
And as I thought Miles and Madison was fantastic. I would have loved to have seen it on one of those platforms. I don't know what that takes, but that's where if you can get it there, now you're working with something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys remember y'all remember Preston Smith that used to shoot in CrossFit? Really talented. So Preston shot the Netflix quarterbacks documentary. All the Patrick Mahomes stuff was Preston.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But that's a product of like, you know, it's very limited here, like you're talking about. Like Lauren's talking about, you got to outsource this, that, and like you got to deal with every brand to kind of cover stuff. And like Preston found a road out and is riding that thing at 100 miles an hour. And so
Good for him.
I'd love to see something, dude. Like the quarterbacks documentary, like it was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Every part of it. Like I don't even know how Marcus Mariota got on it, but that part was awesome. But
Yeah.
like, I mean, even Miles to Madison, I think they covered 2 people that year that did not qualify to regionals, but you get people so invested in it.
Yeah.
That it's something to follow.
And another thing you can do during that, you know, if you're doing an episodic thing, you can cover masters and adaptive athletes. Like that's the place to do it. Like sprinkle it in with the elite. Like, and now you're getting invested in these people's stories. Like it's because that to me is like, if you can get that done, man, that is like a home run.
Yeah, because just like quarterbacks in some of these long form, like episodic docuseries, an element of it is ultimately what happens on the competition floor, but live competition isn't the like meat of the situation. A lot of it is behind the scenes. So like the storytelling about the person in as an individual, you know,
people,
yeah, absolutely supersedes it. And that's where you can get, that's where masters athletes will shine. That's where adaptive athletes will shine. I mean, if Kirk Cousins can come out looking as good as he has from those weekend from that series, and everyone basically thought, you know, he was Mr. Cole's Cash himself going into it. I think that's should be a something that's perfect for CrossFit. And let's be fair, they were doing that way back in the day. Marston and Heber were pitching this Road to the Game series and doing. They were following athletes at regionals, you know, back in the day, even when they didn't qualify.
Yeah. The only thing I would say about those is that there was no like narrative thread that was held throughout them. They were sort of more standalone. Like there didn't seem to be like it didn't seem to be one, like you put them all together, you'd watch one contiguous.
Oh,
they were great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, they were each their own individual pieces.
But it was for the CrossFit audience. Like the CrossFit audience loves that. But someone outside of it, you need a little bit more to get them hooked.
You know, so the quarterbacks was cool. And one of my favorite things, hell, I bought golf clubs, was the Full Swing documentary about golfers.
Yeah.
Like they went home with them. Like you guys are talking about humanizing them, getting everything that surrounds that and all the things that go in. Because I mean, how often do you have the conversation with somebody that just stepped into an affiliate they've been there for 6 months. They're like, hey, probably going to the CrossFit Games next year, brother. Well, cool. Now you get to follow Justin around and see that like Justin's in bed at 8 a.m. Like what Matt's saying in his documentary. I didn't even cut my own chicken for that whole year.
Didn't want to slice my hand.
The knife.
And dude, I had interacted with him and told people he was a jerk. And then after that, I'd like apologize to people. I was like, dude, I get it now. You're the fucking greatest to ever do it. But they humanizing people like that, man, or just recognizing like what kind of psychopath you got to be and what goes into it.
Exactly.
That knows no secret.
And getting back to, Dex, you mentioned Hard Knocks. Like one of the most fun things about watching Hard Knocks is they will focus on a player who's like on the bubble that you really don't care about, but now all of a sudden you're watching that guy invested in preseason because you're like, come on, man, make the team. And I think that's where you could do a lot with the masters and the adaptive athletes, because there's so many great stories there and so many great characters. But it'll be interesting to see, the kind of direction they go.
Speaking of which, can we shout out some awesome big winners and performers from the games from these divisions?
Yeah, let's do it. That's right.
Like
sure.
One thing I wanted to give some shine to some people that obviously did some amazing performances at that competition. We've talked a lot about everything else, but Jason Grubb, 4-time CrossFit Games champion now. Kevin Kester, 4 for 4, perfect at the games with his 4th title. Ty Jenkins, 3-time teenage champion, ties down for the most. Lucy McGonigal wins at 16, maybe setting up the storyline to be the next 17-year-old to try and make the jump, this time out of Europe next year. Kelly Friel, 3 straight, 5 straight of second or better as a Masters athlete across multiple divisions. Cheryl Brost, her 3rd title. She's had a back and forth. She's won. She's come back. She's won. I mean, she's competed, as an individual, finished in the top 10 over a decade ago. An amazing lifespan of an athlete so far. Sam Briggs, her 2nd title, 3rd podium across 3 different divisions, just continues to amaze us with what she can do. Susan Clark, maybe the most dominant, soon to be 6 for 6.
Julie says she wants to be her when she grows up, and
Oh
I
my
agree.
gosh. Won 4 straight tests to pull away on the at the end. Go to the adaptive divisions. Valerie Cohen, we've had her on this podcast, 3 straight in the lower extremity, 1 on a tiebreak after winning the final test. When we talk about clutch performances at the end, she had a great battle with Bailey Hooper. Casey Akery, 24 of the 25 tests at the games he has won, 22 straight, 3 titles, pure dominance. I know he's part of that underdog crew, right? He's just been dominant all 3 years, and he's kind of become the face of the adaptive divisions, particularly at the games. Eric Cohen, podium after tearing the long head of his biceps 5 days before the games, got clearance from his orthopedist, and still managed to do it, just kept it quiet. I just wanted to give him a shout out about that as well. So some awesome performers from the age group and adaptive division, since we haven't, been able to talk about
and I think you mentioned a lot of stuff in there, like Casey and Susan, Jason Grubb, like all these athletes who those are intriguing, cool stories that you could tell on ESPN, interspersed with your elite coverage. And that would be
his YouTube channel.
And it's also interesting because at my first affiliate, when I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin, I went to CrossFit Green Bay, and in the 60 to 64 age group, Tom Famery got 2nd. I'm still really good friends with his coach and some of the other people at the affiliate. And he was saying to me, man, you wouldn't believe how different the athletes and the coaches interact with each other before the event. They're telling each other their strategies. They're giving each other advice. And I just think that even the behind the scenes of the way that the athletes interact versus the elite division could be a super interesting story to tell, and just their relationships with each other.
If you've ever heard Ron Ortiz talk to Kevin that won that thing, like, dude, him, James Sprague's dad, when he was going, like, I think it was last year he went, it is the funniest group of just dads. And, and Ron is one of the sweetest, one of my favorite people, and hearing those cats converse, whether it's there or having margaritas between the days of the competition, it's there are, and even Tommy rattling that stuff off, there's so many storylines, dude. 22 of something events you've been in, that's insane. But my brain's always fixed on this thing, everything that encompasses CrossFit, dude, and seeing those people in the gym, and they relate to who is in there every day across all age groups. I think 35 to 39 is a sexy one, but 60 plus, 50 plus, those are people that the methodology has benefited the most. And I hope down the road that those stories are ones that they want to tell, to keep this train rolling at full speed, and to, bleed into a lot of different things. And so, if that takes getting on different platforms and all that stuff, I really hope that happens.
Yeah, it's tough too, because I think a lot of us, at least people that have been around more than the last 4 to 5 years, still have a lot of those mental anchors that remind us when CrossFit had this huge centralized media team, right? And something like maybe subsidizing some age group coverage could happen. So there was this storytelling throughout the year. There was all this stuff that was going on, and it was in one place, right? That's the good and bad of this new era, right? There's much more opportunities for content creators in this space, but with it being decentralized, you have to go to a lot of different places to keep up with it. And I think that hurts age group divisions, particularly the Masters athletes, more than anyone else.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think the bottom line is money, great stories to tell, but people don't necessarily want to show up to watch those stories take place. They want to know about it afterwards.
Let's get some again, going back to what I heard a ton is if they get the opportunity to stand on their own, get some age group exclusive like sponsors and partners.
Mhm.
You know, could you imagine the 50 plus divisions brought to you by Tommy Bahama?
Oh,
Oh yeah.
You got
brought to you by good dudes relaxing shoes.
Toro mowers,
Oh.
the Ryobi cordless leaf blower.
Oh
you know.
man, yeah.
Event 2 sponsored by the Ryobi cordless leaf blower.
You know exactly what Sean's
Yeah.
got in his garage.
It's like good dad stuff. Grills. Yeah, it'd be great, man. Like I think like there's a lot of opportunity here, but I think people just need to understand. Like, I don't know if we're going to go back to masters and adaptives looking like the coverage that we get from the individuals, but there are ways to do it. And my hope is that they find a way to, maybe not cover the actual events themselves the way that we're used to seeing the individuals, but tell the stories in a way that doesn't make them look out of place when you tell them in an individual broadcast, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or lock them in the barn. Lock them in the barn at the venue where you had. Remember that when they used to be just in that one, like.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what the hell that venue is during the year, but it sure feels like they had cow stalls in
Yeah,
there.
no, they do. It's like a livestock. In Madison, that's where they do like livestock shows.
Yeah, there's a milking station out back behind that shed.
If we need a silver lining there, we are getting to North Park and we do get in the Coliseum now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're look, if you keep this schedule, maybe people just have to understand it's going to be the last event when we crown champions. And that's pretty cool too. Like that's for a big audience, but it's a changing landscape. Money is going to drive a lot of these decisions. I love the adaptive and masters athletes. I am a masters athlete. I find them absolutely incredible. Like I used to be like, hey man, if I could I just want to be a fit, like 50-year-old woman now. Like if I can get there, I'm like, all right, I'm good to go. Cause they're all incredible. Like the stuff that they are able to do, it's unbelievable. And it's just the harsh reality that the eyeballs are not there yet to justify that expense. So what can we do to fix that? And I think there's some decent solutions out there. So
communicate being one of them for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, let's hope that changes because
we got some. I definitely we have some community support, and I don't know. Do you guys got a PR and No Rep of the week?
Not really.
I got a couple,
okay.
but certainly some big community support going on. With the Maui wildfires going on, the Maui Strong Fund has been raising money for all of the people in Lahaina affected by it. Fit Aid, I know, is one of the companies that's helping raise money. They're donating all the proceeds from, I think, one of their specific flavors that was a Hawaiian flavor for it. There's the Hawaii Community Fund. A handful of organizations are raising money for that. I know they've since gone on social media, but a ton of people reached out to us asking if we had heard about how like Chan Cho and Freddie were doing, and they had touched base. I reached out to them, and I was fortunate to get a text back from them when they didn't know if they were getting service and that they were safe. So that they continue to be safe at this point, and that they're staying there to support their community. I know that I just got a message from, the Maui. There's another fundraiser that's going from, it's called Island Dream Productions. They do a lot of the photography for the tourist industry there. They are building a donation for GoFundMe.com. Just if you go to GoFundMe and you look Island Dream Productions Ohana, it'll pop up. It's their wildfire relief. They've already raised $15,000. They're aiming for $100,000, and they just started the fundraising. So a bunch of different ways that you can go and support it. It's crazy. My wife and I were just there last year, and a ton of damage has been done. Some very like sacred pieces of the island for them. The banyan tree is, I fear is lost. So definitely want to go support them and give them some love.
Yeah. And if anyone knows of any CrossFit specific charities or that anything that the CrossFit community there is doing, please let us know. We want to definitely amplify that message. So
for sure.
You got PRs and No Reps?
I have a couple. I definitely have a PR. I'm going to PR going big. And it's, did you hear the report about Phil Mickelson?
I heard he gambled on something, and I don't know how much it was.
They said a new book is
I didn't
coming
hear
out.
about this.
There's a famous sports sharp and sports gambler who claims that based off the numbers back from the books that Phil Mickelson has bet $1 billion across his career.
That doesn't shock me.
And that he estimates his losses around 100 mil.
Think of what all the good he could have done with that money.
I'm going to be honest. That's not bad for a sports gambler. If you've bet a total of $1 billion, you've lost 10%.
That's what I was about to say. That's good numbers. That's
It's not bad.
90% of the time.
It works every time.
We don't want to encourage that excess. If you have a problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But at the same time, that's crazy. But yeah,
at the same time, never walk away from a heater.
Exactly. Well, because that coupled with a video came out practice round before I think the St. Jude this past week or maybe a couple weeks ago for one of the Live Tour events. Bryson DeChambeau and Phil Mickelson were going to play a practice round together. And Bryson's like, hey, you want to play? He's like, yeah, what do you want to play for? And Bryson's like, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. And Mickelson's like, what do you mean you hadn't thought about it?
How about $1 million?
And he goes, yeah. And he goes, all right. And immediately rattles off like, all right, $1,000 a hole. You can press for half if you're down in the final hole, but you can't walk away on top unless you win. We're going to play upsy, downsy, all these different things, like rattled it off. Like Phil has done this a bajillion times. And Bryson's just like, okay. And it was the funniest clip. And it came out right as that press release came out about his gambling exploits. But
they were like, this tracks. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually knew a guy that I worked with a guy who used to work in the clubhouse at Sawgrass. And he would tell me stuff about his gambling. And I was like, dang. That's nuts.
I'm a $1 a hole guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your no rep?
Yeah.
My no rep was going to be Bryson DeChambeau for bringing that weak stuff in here.
Oh man.
not knowing what you're gonna gamble for, but yeah.
Anybody else got a PR shout out, no rep they want to throw out there?
I have a PR. I do not have a no rep. I want to give a PR to Rob Alexander. He was a volunteer for the media team at the CrossFit Games, and he was placed with me every time that I was in the Coliseum to be the volunteer that stuck with me to make sure that I didn't do anything I wasn't supposed to in the athlete warm-up area.
Your chaperone.
There you go.
Yes. My chaperone. But let me tell you, he was so much more than a chaperone. Made sure that I had water, gave me RX bars, gummies, snacks, you name it. Like, hey, if you want to get this athlete, I'm going to go and make sure this athlete is on deck for you. Like, he was the sweetest, nicest, respectful, amazing person that could have been chosen for my chaperone.
They gave you an assistant.
Essentially, yeah.
I just picture them introducing themselves and it cuts like 5 minutes later and Lauren's like in a shrink chair, like sharing her life story with this guy. It's like, and I think that's when I really became afraid of spiders. But
Oh wait, I was trying to help you find Lauren Horvath. You got one next?
Yeah. My little girl's 3. We're going to our second week of dance. It's our first recreation party.
All right. Do you get out? Are you getting out there and cutting a rug or what?
If they will allow me in the room, I will act a complete fool, and I don't care what the scenario is. I think you all know that. And they, crazy dance dad era, but she is normally shy and she's not there. She loves it. So we come home and reenact everything so daddy can feel like he's a part of it. So
cool. I love that.
So it'll be cool.
I'll PR football being back, and I will no rep overreacting to week 1 of the preseason.
Yeah.
So, but it's back. That's all right. But
that was another. I was a PR keeping it in the family because Deuce Vaughn's dad is a scout for the Cowboys, and Deuce Vaughn had me and Chase were already overreacting to
this guy looks amazing.
It's preseason
first game. Settle down. All right. Well, we got good stuff coming up. Dex, you got anything you want to let the people know about that you're doing?
I pray to God they fix all these Masters problems because it's my first year. I've been
Oh,
excited about
yeah.
this. I've
You
been
can
excited
still
about this
compete.
since 2015. Yeah, but look, I'm one of them she asked that doesn't want their own standalone thing. I want to be at the show. Even if I'm a stepchild, I want to be at the show. I go from one stepchild group of teams to the other stepchild group of wrestling. And so, yeah, no, it'll be fun, man. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun year.
Well, awesome, man. And thanks for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. We got an interview later this week, I think, Thursday? With Pat Vellner and Michelle Otani.
We're doing it live.
We're going to do it live. We have those two on. We got Ariel Lowen scheduled.
With Jay Crouch.
Yeah, we got Jay Crouch's will be released soon.
Mm-hmm.
You guys talked to him yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So a lot of good stuff. And we're going to try to track down Adrian Bosman at some point, too, to do a little game debrief. So that'll be fun. But yeah, that's it. Dex, man, thanks so much for hanging out. We really appreciate the perspective. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks, everyone, for listening. For Dex Hopkins, Lauren Kalil, Tommy Marquez, I'm Sean Woodland. Take care of each other. Be better. And we